Last time we had a very interesting conversation. In fact, quite a bit of back and forth. I thought. Of course, you did ask me to defend a few points in Advaita, but I will keep it for maybe a later conversation because I think certain things you are going in a particular way, and I thought it was a very logical way of build up. For example, in my mind, this Sakshi concept which you established, as well as Abhinav Anyata Khyati as the Khyati choice of Tattva Vaada, together should add up to establishing the core concepts of Tattva Vaada, that is, Jagat Satyam, the reality of the universe. That is an extremely, extremely important concept, which is differentiated from Advaita. That's one thing. And after establishing the reality of the concept, going further to show that that reality is graded reality, hierarchically graded reality, has a deep ramifications. I mean, it goes up to the moksha level and post-moksha level also. It goes to a very long level, long depth in my view. So, these two concepts, that is, Satyam Jagat, as well as Taratamya, are cornerstone concepts in Tattva Vaada. More so because I think, I hope I'm correct in saying this, where, in my view, Shrimad Anandatheertha Muni has gone far beyond others and probably taken a leap of faith, according to me, is transposing these concepts of reality and gradation even in moksha. That is really very, very different from many other concepts of philosophy, because most of the philosophical models tend to treat moksha as, shall we say, everything is non-earthly. Whatever we see, do, live in this earth, it's not going to be there. It's going to be radically different, is what most of the philosophies talk about. However, Anandatheertha Muni has chosen to say that moksha life is going to mirror the earthly life, accepting all the doshas which are attached to the earthly life. That is all the love, the jealousy, anger, depression, comparing. These negative elements go away, but it is going to be very similar to what earthly life is. Though all the jivas tend to reorient Sriman, Sri Hari, Narayana Murti, Narayana, Vishnu as the only source, not only as a source of joy and bliss, but also object of bliss. People are not going to look around for anything else for joy or bliss. Is a kind of a coloration which he has given. But the core point is, moksha is also real. There is taratamya in moksha. The universe is jagat also is real. There is taratamya in the jagat. This is very important concept, and I hope you will connect those two things. That is the Sakshi concept and Abhinava Anyata Khyati concept to establish these principles. And probably now in future, in next or subsequent session, I'll come back and say why I find most of the Dvaitis, not the modern Dvaitins, even the established scholars, knowingly or mistakenly ignore the fundamental concept in Advaita, which is context defines everything. You cannot take sound bites, conclusions, the arguments in one context and take it to another. That is a fundamental argument in Advaita. Therefore, taking the experience of Brahmagnani, who was there as Aham Brahmasmi, and then trying to argue that person's experience, etc., from standpoint of those who are in the dukkha samsara, ajnanis, using the words, concepts, logic, and say, oh, how can you do that? How can you do this? Is the argument I believe most of the Dvaitins are indulging in. Therefore, this is going to be a little bit acrimonious. Therefore, I will reserve it for the next or the subsequent lecture. Right now, I would let you go ahead and establish these foundational concepts. Please.
Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Narasimho Akhilajnanamatadvanta Divakarah Jayatyamita Sajnana Subhashikti Payonidhi Abhramam Bhangarahitam Ajadam Vimalam Sada Anandatheertha Matulam Bhaje Tapatrayabaham आपादमौलिपर्यन्तं गुरूणाम् आकृतिं स्मरेत् तेन विघ्नाः प्रणश्यन्ति सिद्ध्यन्ति च मनोरथाः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ओम् नमस्कार. So basically I think we'll again, as I do always, let's do a little bit recap. So what we have established so far is that Sakshi is not something totally a new concept, or I mean the words may be new, but it is something that is evident to us in every experience that is out there. That is the fundamental validator or the arbiter of knowledge, or validity or invalidity. We have seen that if you take Sakshi as one of the things, there are different instruments of knowledge. Pratyaksha is there, Anumana is there, Agama is there. They all give different inputs. But this is the one which finally says, okay, this is valid, this is not valid. And sometimes, and it also is self-referential. So it knows itself. It knows that there are three inputs. And it knows that there are inputs coming about. I mean, there are multiple things that we showed last time. I will go to that slide, but essentially this Sakshi, which is getting these inputs from these three different sources, that is the one which says that, first of all, I am real, time is real, space is real, that there are three different sources is also real, and that there are three different states is also real, and that there is an external world is also real. So this Sakshi essentially, which determines the validity of knowledge or invalidity of knowledge, it doesn't mistake at any point of time. It may withdraw the judgment in cases of some wrong knowledge. For example, when a snake is seen instead of a rope, there are two inputs that are coming to the Sakshi there. Basically, like in any other case, right? There is a snake here, and this knowledge is valid. Both keep coming. So in case of a rope, when it says a rope, again that same knowledge has both the knowledge of the rope and the validity of itself. In case of invalid knowledge, Sakshi grasps only the knowledge, and it is non-judgmental. It suspends the judgment about the invalidity part or the validity part. That is a judgment that is pushed by the manas because of its biases, or raga dvesha, whatever we call that. In case of the rope, Sakshi accepts both of those things. We have given enough logic as to why we have to accept this model, wherein a self-referential validator or arbiter is needed for any system to function given our universal experience. We are not talking about Dvaita, Advaita or anything like that here. Any system, if it has to be aligned to our universal experience, right, it needs to say that, okay, this is aligned to Sakshi. Okay. For example, you can say, what if you get a future knowledge that time does not exist? Okay. So will Sakshi accept it? Sakshi will not be able to accept it. It will basically say that knowledge, it will question that knowledge, because whatever its own perception of the validity of cognition of time, it has so far cognized the time to be valid. So if whichever source tells it that time does not exist, it will discard that thing. That is why, people may call this, naive realism or something like that. That's what, some self-stylist, self-styled professors of Vedanta and quantum physics, they all try to put this thing as naive realism. But there really is no basis for doing that. So anyway, so that is one point. So the reality is primarily the reality of externality of the world is something which is a foregone conclusion by the way Sakshi operates. It is not something that where it has to, validate two inputs and then provide this thing. It is seeing it, it is experiencing time. It knows that time is valid. That is why, when you ask, let's say we ask Sadhguru, right, when did you experience your Advaita or so this thing for the first time? He'll say, when I went to this Chamundi hills and then, suddenly something happened. He will give a reference in time. I mean, so everybody, right? I mean, or when did you say, So basically it is inevitable that every knowledge is tied to some point in time. So why is that happening? Because Sakshi has already accepted that time is a dimension that cannot be done with. That's why even Shrutis which says only Brahman existed or Atma existed, they say at the beginning. Okay, Atma va are idamagra asit, Brahma va idamagra asit. It's always that agra is always there. It is agre actually. It is always there. So it is. So it is a Sakshi has basically said time is real. I am real. My bliss is real. Same thing, right? I will come to those slides here. So I'm trying to give a very overview kind of answer for your question. So the reality of the world is a given because Sakshi says so. That's why, in fact, Advaitic even writers like Madhusudana Saraswati, they say that first Dvaita has to be rejected. See, the question is, which one do you give a proof of? Do you give a proof of positive proof of Advaita, or do you reject Advaita and then come to Advaita, or vice versa? So it is given, it is Advaita is self-evident to everybody. When I say Dvaita here, I am talking about the multiplicity of the experience. If you remember our first conversation, right? People act as if, they are God or they are mostly atheist is what I had told at that point of time. That was the point from the point of view of independence. So people think they are very independent and so on and so forth, right? But when it comes to multiplicity, everybody is a Dvaitavadi. Everybody does accept that Dvaita is, or the multiplicity is at the core of their experience. Just like the knowledge of I is non-controvertible, it cannot be changed later, right? Nobody can say, okay, look, you didn't exist at that time, right? The feeling of I was not there or something like that, right? Just like that, you cannot say that, time does not exist, or that there are these three states, Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, whatever you call that, is that they do not exist, right? So at the core of all experience is this Sakshi, which is the experiencer, which experiences itself. It also experiences Pramanya. It also basically says that it understands that the knowledge of rope is valid, and it experiences that validity, which is why it gives that experience more reason or more strength rather than the other way, than the knowledge of snake. Let me complete the other point. Again, this is more the question of Taratamya, right? In Taratamya and Moksha and all that. So that is more of an ontology, Ontology is something that is derived from epistemology at the end of the day. Okay, so that is why we are looking at epistemology first. What are all the sources of knowledge? What about their conflicts? That's what we are going to see today. And how do you resolve those conflicts? Which one will take more precedence over the other? Which one is superior under what circumstances? Are we looking at whatever we are taking as pramana? Is it complete? Is it good enough? Or comprehensiveness? That's what we will look at. Once that is settled, now the next part is, what do these sources of knowledge tell us? Otherwise, at this point of time, I really do not know anybody called Vishnu, right? Or anything called moksha. How do I even know that there is something called moksha? It may be a human, endeavor, right? I want to be happy all the time, but that could just be a wish. It doesn't have to be a reality. How do I know that there is something called heaven or hell, right? Or how do I know there is something called as muddy or pure or impure or anything of that sort? All of that is something that is derived from the epistemology. So once we have a strong epistemic model, then we can talk to the ontology, and that is where Taratamya becomes established. And that is where we will see as to why Taratamya is even in moksha is told by the scripture. Scripture can be the only source of that knowledge, and that scripture tells you that there is Taratamya there. Asama babhuhu akshanvanta karnavanta. It says this, okay? The Rigveda says this. The people in moksha, they have their ears and eyes and everything, but they are unequal. Asama babhuhu. It says that, okay? Or so there are we can get into that. We will definitely get into those details later. So the ontology of which is where Taratamya is part of is determined once you have a solid model for epistemology. If you don't fix this, whatever ontology we talk about later, right, it will all be questionable. Okay, so this is important because yeah, now I think this is important because otherwise, we will keep switching back between these two types of pramanas and things like that. We need to know what can be a pramana for what.
Right.
And only when that pramana is there, then, the prameya can be established. Manadhina meya siddhi. That is a standard dictum over here. Okay. So with that, let me share my screen. You are saying something.
I want to ask.
Yeah, please go ahead.
First is highlighting and appreciating a point you just made. I think it's very important for readers or for viewers. That is, Sakshi is not only a validator of being a self-awareness, validator for external experience, and more importantly, it is the source of validation for any validity which is offered by cross-referencing. This link, I think, is very, very important. Otherwise, as you probably mentioned in the passing, I just wanted to make it very, very clear for viewers. Otherwise, then we'll have to figure out, okay, who is going to validate Sakshi and things like that. So that is a very important point you mentioned, which I really appreciate. Very, very valid. On the other hand, to some extent, your claim that if future somebody were to come back and say time does not exist, Sakshi will reject it. I think that kind of borders on arthapati, presumption. There's no validity for this argument, right? I mean, you can't say, or it should not become a tautology, right? Circular logic. Well, why does Sakshi say so? Because it says so. I mean, that is not a very strong Vaada.
Okay. So we'll come to that point, sir. Let me continue my presentation here.
Okay.
So if you remember, right, you're able to see my screen now?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. 1 minute.
Yes, it's coming up. Yes.
Okay, so this is what we had seen in the earlier. So we had seen these earlier, saying that how Sakshi, basically all instruments of knowledge, they by default produce valid knowledge. Sakshi, when they produce such valid knowledge, Sakshi grasps both the knowledge and validity. And in some cases, wherever there is a mental block also, Sakshi will just, even if valid knowledge is produced by the sensory organs, because of the intervention from the mind, they may not accept, the Sakshi does not accept the validity, it accepts only knowledge. We also looked at how Sakshi does not accept invalid knowledge. The point to remember is all of this is established based on universal experience. We thought, and also based on the logic that if such a feature is not accepted, it will result in infinite regress. There won't be anything called as valid knowledge or invalid knowledge. And even that principle by itself will not be acceptable because there is no upperceiver, there is no cognizer, or there is no experience of that knowledge. So with that, we went to this point of saying, this is the nature of Sakshi. Sakshi is basically the one which is valid by default, and it should be self-reflective. And we also looked at the different instruments of knowledge, where Sakshi is also considered an Indriya by itself. And we looked at what are the objects of such instruments or sources of knowledge. So here, please note, I mean, this is the most important part here. The manas, I hope the slide is readable right now.
No, it's good. This time it's very good.
Okay. So, yeah. So the here manas, right, which is there are 5 to 6 facets of manas, which is buddhi, ahankara, chit, chaitanya, and so there are different facets that are told in our scriptures. So they all basically convey their objects is the knowledge that is generated by the Indriya, and then they put these, they convey the same to Sakshi. Now look at Sakshi and its object, right? Basically, it looks, the Sakshi Sakshi is object, right? If you look at an Indriya and its instrument, so you have Sakshi and its knowledge is its own self. It's that of time, bliss, and so on and so forth. So now this is where what we are saying is that if somebody says, how do you know you exist? What will you say?
It's a joy and goes on. That's it.
Sorry. No. There is a I think therefore I exist, or I know I exist. There is a difference there, because thinking is still a mental process at the end of the day.
Okay. Well, I know I exist is the only answer I can give.
Yes. So is that tautology, or is it that's how it is?
To some extent, it is tautology or a starting assumption.
Is it an assumption?
It is a convenient assumption, because if I don't recognize that I exist, any thought or experience which so-called I get, I don't know whether I get or somebody else is getting. So there's no conversation after that.
So is it okay? No. So that's an important point there. So if you do not accept there is something, there is some, you don't know whether you are getting that thought or somebody else is getting that thought. So therefore you assume that you exist. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Why not the other position? Let's say that you don't exist and somebody else is getting that thought. What stops you from going that way? Why do you call it inconvenient? On what basis are you determining the convenience and inconvenience of this?
But the thing is, if it is happening to somebody else, I'm not going to get that experience.
No. We are not talking about somebody else. The question is that when you said, I know I exist, is a convenient assumption. I am questioning the part of convenience and assumption over there. On what basis did you say it is convenient, and on what basis did you say it's an assumption?
Okay. I'm calling it assumption because I don't have any third party cross validation of the concept that I exist. I am calling it convenient because if I seem to enjoy whatever is happening to so-called I, why give it up?
Okay. So see, this is where the problem comes. So again there, right? I mean, there is a lot of self-referentiality in your own statement. But anyway, let's come to the assumption part, okay? So you are saying it's an assumption because there is no cross-validation. See, that is what we were trying to say, that, there is nothing like cross-validation here. When Sakshi is basically saying that, look, I am not validating this against something else, and therefore I know that I exist. If we take that model,
correct,
I will cross-validate, and then therefore I will say there is whatever experience is there, it is true or not. It will lead to the same anavastha that we spoke later.
Correct.
Let's say there is some other reference that gives you that, you exist. What is the proof, or what is the guarantee that that particular cross-reference is valid?
Correct.
So on and so forth. But why can't we say that let anavastha exist? No. Why do we even accept? Why do you have to remove that anavastha? What would be your answer then?
My answer would be, if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to remove that, the only thing you do in life is cross-validating every validator. You won't do anything else.
Yeah, see, and let that person say, yeah, sure, no problem. What is wrong with that? So the answer to that is, see, our experience says that there is valid knowledge. It is not like every time we keep cross-referencing. That is why I cannot end with a state of infinite regress. Even let's say I make an inference saying that therefore there exists no certain knowledge. All knowledge is doubtful at the end of the day. Even to make this inference, right? Even to make this inference, there needs to be something that accepts that inference, that accepts the knowledge of that particular inference. And that has to be certain.
Correct.
So that position is not only flawed because of the, the infinite regress, because it is self-contradictory at the end of the day.
Very true.
Therefore, it is not an assumption.
Okay, that's a conclusion. You're saying, though we are not going through the process of conclusion.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is not because, I have that logical argument is only to remove this, opposing theories that it could be an assumption or it is an invalid, convenient assumption or whatever it is. It is otherwise self-evident. That is the meaning of self-evident.
Correct.
And therefore, it is not tautology. I mean, tautology we can say, but the end of it, there is no other proof. I know that is what we have to say is Sakshi. That is what we say is at the end of it is the proof. So if somebody says you do not exist, right, it will become false. If somebody says you did not exist, I mean, let's say yesterday, right? If somebody says you did not exist yesterday, what will you do then? How will you disprove that person? You can show some documentation, you can show some mails, you can show some, you can, whatever artifacts are there. But let's say that person says all of these are questionable, they are all creatable. At that point, you will say that, look, I do not have to prove to you that I existed yesterday. So which means that Sakshi, just like it has knowledge of itself, the knowledge of self is infallible. It is you cannot override that. You cannot change it later. By the same token, it has knowledge of even time. That is how you will say I existed yesterday also, or day before yesterday also. You don't need any other proof, any other means of any other source of knowledge as a cross reference. It is self-evident. That is the meaning of saying Sakshi. This is an object of Sakshi, or this is a Vishaya, Sakshi Vishaya. And it is not limited to time alone. Okay. The same thing applies to bliss. For example, just let's say you had a nice meal or whatever it is, and you felt happy. You felt this one. No amount of logic can ever remove or change that thing.
Very true.
Right? I should recollect what Shankaracharya says here, right? He says, no amount of scripture can change, can make fire cold or make, he says something like that. Or crow white or something like that. I don't remember the crow white part, but at least the fire cold kind of thing. Why? Because these are all objects of Sakshi, and Sakshi has not only grasped those objects, but also the validity of this knowledge. Is it tautologous or it is just a random claim? Do you think it is a random claim? So just like, no, that's where the question comes. Basically, the moment you accept that, Sakshi grasps itself.
Yes.
Sakshi also grasps time. Right? In the judgment, it says, I existed yesterday. It involves a perception of time by Sakshi. Okay. And not just that, even you wake up, when you say from deep sleep, right? I experienced bliss for so long, right? There, in Sushupti, you do not have Manas active. At that point of time, Sakshi is the only thing that is out there. So it accepts the validity of time, it accepts the validity of bliss, and also of self.
Okay.
So these are not tautological statements. These are valid, self-evident statements, self-evident pieces of knowledge. And when I say self, it is again the Sakshi which is evident, which is meant by that self over there.
Okay.
Right. Same thing with ignorance. I do not know. For example, do you know what is there behind this laptop? You do not know. How do you know that? How do you know that you do not know? You will say it's self-evident. So whatever we hesitate to say this self-evident is actually, but it feels that there is, it feels that it is a knowledge of, it's an object of knowledge. There lies the Sakshi, this one. But I must caution here, right? I mean, there is one more thing which comes in relevant here, right? Which is that.
Hello.
Are you able to hear me?
Hello. Network interruption, so I had to, restart the whole thing. Yeah.
So we will. You're able to see the screens here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So here, basically, what we were trying to say is why Sakshi is it is not tautologous, or it is an absolutely non-controvertible truth that whatever is grasped by Sakshi as valid is valid always, and it cannot be changed. So what we were trying to show is that the Sakshi, and it was not convenient, it was not assumption, it is truth because Sakshi says so. And if such a thing is not agreed upon, right? If We don't have, if that such a nature of Sakshi is not agreed upon, there is absolutely nothing which tells us what can be the such validator at all. For example, let's say somebody comes and tells you that Sakshi does not exist. So who is going to validate this one? Eventually Sakshi has to do that, right?
Yes.
And even there has to, or if there is no time, somebody says that, who has to validate that? And Sakshi has to validate that. So one has to accept that Sakshi is there, it validates, and its validation is final. It is not changeable. If the changeability, if it has to, that's what Acharya's, one of the quotes that you gave last time, it applies. If it can change its judgments, then there is no finality in any of that thing. Then there is nothing final at all. Whether it be Dvaita or Advaita or anything at all, there can be nothing. You cannot take a stance. You cannot even take a stance that you cannot take a stance.
Correct. Very true. Very true.
Right. So therefore, you have to admit, you have to say that by our experience, you have to accept something called Sakshi, which is self-reflective and which is valid by default. And this is not, again, assumption and convenience. And what are all these objects of Sakshi? We accept that Sakshi is something, which can not only perceive itself, it perceives time, it perceives bliss, pain, it perceives its own ignorances, it perceives that the emotions keeps changing, it perceives that there are external objects, and in the external objects is not just in moksha, right? The externality of this. So if there is Sakshi, that I am getting inputs about a world that is not created by me, that also is available to Sakshi. And infinitude, how do you know that numbers are infinite, or how do you know that space is infinite? All of that is known to you by Sakshi only, and it is again not axiomatic, or it is not a convenient assumption. Now, we looked at some of the I'm just trying to put this thing, whatever we saw a couple of slides back, I'm trying to put that in a slide here, which says that these are all the different instruments of knowledge, and these are the different flaws that can come over there. We didn't look at the problems of in verbal communication, which is agama. You can make a non-parsable statement, you can make a non-comprehensible statement, you can make a wrong statement. All of these things are flaws there. These are the flaws in this one, but the final assertion of validity is done by this. How do you know that there are these flaws, right? Sakshi will determine that. And it doesn't do it at the immediate this thing. That is where corroboration or cross-referencing is needed. We do admit that cross-referencing is needed to tell that there is wrong knowledge or invalidity over there. Whereas for telling there is something correct, you don't need cross-referential this thing. Sakshi is the one which can assert that. We established this again based on the case of using anavastha and things like that. These are the flaws in manas which can come in over there. Basically, whatever we call as raga dvesha is right now, we call them biases, confirmation bias, or there are some n number of biases out there. And then there is the other problem is that because of these biases, manas also does some sort of pramanya nishchaya. Basically, it also asserts the validity at times.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, this is an important point. So see, if Sakshi has not accepted the validity, why will a person get fear when he looks at the snake? There is knowledge coming in from Indriya and Manas which says that this is snake. Why will Sakshi, which has not accepted that validity, why will it even react? Why will it show fear? Why is that instinctive reaction of fear there? Or when you see a shell and silver case, right? Why do you feel like picking it up? So there, the Dvaita theory is that Manas is also pushing another knowledge, another thing which says that this particular thing is real, or this is valid. So Sakshi accepts that also as at a knowledge level, and because of the Manas this thing, and because of other samskaras or whatever it is, it will pick it up. But it does not mean that it has accepted that knowledge as real. This is an important point. We will. Are you able to see me?
Yeah, I'm able to see you. Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Please go ahead.
Okay. So because this is very important. So if I understand the train of logic correctly, Sakshi automatically, spontaneously, instantaneously validates. Even to borrow from Sri Jayatirtha, correct knowledge is the default situation. Only wrong knowledge investigation is required. If that is extended, we have to conclude Sakshi automatically, instantaneously, spontaneously validates, gives the correct knowledge, continues to give the correct knowledge all the time. The intervening elements of mind, etc., which create that confusion, causes the fear. That is why you fear the rope as a snake. Am I right in arguing this way?
Yeah. I mean, you're mostly there. There is only one small correction I would put over there. When we say by default it gives the right knowledge, we basically say that all knowledge that is produced itself is default by the instruments produce the right knowledge.
Yeah.
So I am talking about eye level, eye or ears or inference or words. They produce knowledge correctly by default, without if there is no hindrance or intervention by any other flaws. When there are flaws, they can produce wrong knowledge. Okay, so you are right. So therefore, at that point of time, Sakshi basically withdraws from judging it, but it accepts the knowledge. So that's why you're able to even make a judgment saying that I had seen a snake there at that point of time.
Okay. So now I'm going to get a little cheeky here.
No problem.
So, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because your voice is very intermittent from my side.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if this is the case, what is wrong in Advaita argument that Brahman is the reality? It only mistakes due to Maya Shakti that it is differentiated. This is same argument told in a different way, right? Hello?
I think there is some connection issue. Are you able to hear me well now?
I think network is very bad. I don't know what's happened today.
Are you able to hear me now?
Now I'm able to hear. But did you get my question or no?
I got your question. I got your question totally. So see, Brahman, Maya, we are not denying the fact that there are no errors at all or anything like that. We are not, the Prabhakara school which says that there is nothing like erroneous knowledge. We accept that there is erroneous knowledge. We are saying that, a rope can be mistaken as a snake. The question about Brahman and Maya, they come, you need to know your sources. You need to have a validation of that particular thing, right? You need to have an epistemological model, epistemic model, which says that these are the sources from which I know there is Brahman, there is Maya, and because of Maya, this Brahman is mistaken like this. So we don't have a problem in just at that point of time saying that much. But where it goes into problematic situation is when that Brahman is said to be you. Right, and that's what I'll come to in you give me a few minutes. I will come to that particular point of conflict. Then we will talk about this one there. So here, what we are also trying to say is that so these are the whatever I have shown here in the black here, dark here is the knowledge that is communicated by Manas, and these are the things that are put in over there. This is again just a recap of the previous thing itself. On the other hand, knowledge of self, bliss, pain, knowledge conveyed by Manas, space, time, one's ignorance, change in the states, from Jagrat, I was awake and I am not awake now, or, I wasn't awake, I am awake now. This is also known through Sakshi only. The externality of inputs, very important point. So this itself proves the reality of the world. Sakshi says that, look, I did not create that pot, and then it is an input coming to me from outside. The notion of outside and inside is also given by Sakshi. Therefore, the reality of world is established on the grounds of Sakshi. You don't need anything else. Okay, and this is what we mentioned. Let me tell about this point also, which is that this is what we talked about last time, which is why Acharya puts that Anubhava can be there but it has to be Shastrartha Yukta Anubhava, that is the first one, and then just the Agama. So this is again in contradiction with many of the current philosophies, right? Many of the people, they say, no, Anubhava is more important. So there, our problem is that, look, you can have manodoshas, you can have biases because of the way you have been trained or because of the way you have born into a certain family, you have been listening to something, so bias is always there. So you need to have an independent pramana which tells you that this object exists, that there is a heaven and in which these kind of objects exist, or there is Brahman, or there is Allah, or whatever you call that, right? So whatever that thing is there, you need to have an pramana which is independent of your training or biases or whatever it is. Then, and if your anubhava is in line with that, then you need to accept it. Otherwise, you don't accept it. So that anubhava, you don't accept your anubhava. Basically, your anubhava is like that of the snake. Okay, so this is the best pramana. So Acharya has said this thing. So this has multiple ramifications in terms of how you treat spirituality in general, right? For example, if everybody else will go and join a meditation camp, okay, because I want anubhava, right? That's what everybody else is thinking. Whereas a Dvaitin will say, no, let me understand Shastrartha first. So I will go and enroll myself in some course in Vidyapitha or some place like that where they teach me the epistemology. From a practical point of view, there is a big difference. So everybody will say, no, first I will, do Hatha Yoga or whatever it is, and then I will try to understand, I will get my Anubhava, I will feel infinite. But this one says, no, first I need to know Shastrartha. Then we can look at, all the tools and stuff, means that are suggested, recommended over there to get the Anubhava that is mentioned in the Shastra. So very important difference. And so this applies in multiple ways. So for example, even within the Madhva fold, right? For example, somebody has to decide on, there is one controversy about Sri Vadaraja being a Ruju or not. How will you decide that? So one gentleman that he went and did some contemplation or tapas sitting in front of Vadaraja Swami there. Is that the way to do it? It is not the pramana. Shastrartha yukta anubhava pramanam. First you need to determine whether Shastrartha is there, then you can look for anubhava there. So see, this particular thing, everywhere it changes your stuff. So 1 minute. So with that, let me come to the next one. And the same thing is told in even multiple other scriptures, right? Ve brahmani veditavya shabda brahma paramchayat. Shabda brahmani, which is your Veda scripture and all those things, right? Only when you cross them, nishnataha param brahma adhigachyate. Only when then you will get to know the param brahma or the akshara. So very important to understand that first you need to understand Shastrartha, then you can look for, and trying to experience Parabrahman.
Hold on. Please define the meaning of Nishanartha.
Nishnatha is expert.
Huh?
Expert.
Okay, because you said cross, that's why I wanted to say.
No. Nishnatha is having crossed it, or having crossed that particular thing. Are you able to hear some music or something like that?
Some therapy thing is there, like
I do not know what that is.
Yeah, no, that is which are coming in. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, you see at the end of it, Shastrartha. Why is Shastrartha important to a Dvaitin? This is the reason. Why do we spend so much time? If you look at Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and all these people, they said, no, I will first go and then do meditation. That is a wrong approach. I need to know what Shastrartha is so that I don't get biased, or I don't carry forward my biases and then say this is my Anubhava. So with that, let me come to another important point here.
Yeah.
Which is that, this is the next step in the epistemology, right? How do you address conflict?
Right.
Okay. So this is the thing, right? So your one says that fire is hot, and another one says that fire is cold because it is a substance. See, this is the structure of a logic in our Siddhanta. Fire is cold because it is a substance just like ice. Okay? And Pratyaksha says it is hot. So which one will give more validity? This is again very important because, when you extend this thing to today's world, contemporary physics and things like that, right? Anumana plays a big role over here. right? You have, quantum people. There are some people who claim that quantum mechanics teaches that observers create their own reality,
Right.
right? Whereas your pratyaksha says that is not the case. You do not do that really, right? I mean, it's all there. The world is external. Everything is external, and you are just an observer. You are not creating it. Now, which one will you give more validity to?
Are you asking?
Or take the other one.
Okay.
Huh?
No, I don't want to answer because that is going to be a long conversation because I do believe both are correct. They are saying in a context, observers do create the universe because your presence, merely by your presence, the observed universe dramatically changes. And therefore, you only get to see the dramatically changed universe, not the a priori universe. For example, in common parlance, a bunch of people are talking. The moment you walk in, automatically whole mahal, the environment changes, right? Because you could be a stern person, joyful person, non-acceptable person, etc. Automatically, the whole thing changes, and the only thing you get to see is what happens post facto after your entry. Therefore, there is a logical validity in the argument that observers do create an observed universe.
No,
Now,
do
you
they
are,
change the universe? That is not a question.
I'm sorry,
Do they create that universe is a question.
they do because
So do you
because
believe that you have created this laptop here, for example?
that is the problem with most of the Dvaitis do. They translate this argument to
No, no.
physical entities. It is not about physical entities.
Uh-huh.
It is about logical entities, not real. Vastu nahi hai. It is about, for example, when I say that whole mahal changes, it doesn't. People are same size, same weight. Their weight doesn't change. Their color doesn't change.
No, no, we are not saying that changing is not happening. I'm not admitting, I'm admitting that change happens. When I walk in, somebody else can, move their positions here. I mean, regular science also tells that, things change, right? I mean, two body problem and all those things are there. So there is forces of nature that come in over there, and then forces of the mind also, attraction, have hatred, all those things can happen, or neutrality, all of these things can happen. Nobody is questioning the change. The question here is, did you create the pot? Did you create the pot in
I'm
front of
coming
you?
to that.
So
Therefore,
when you go to the details, right?
yeah.
I mean, at a very overall level, it is easy to make some statement and then say both are valid. The question is we do not create any reality without that to my intervention over there.
It depends upon the meaning of create.
Very good. Yeah. So we will come to that thing. I think, as you said, it is a bigger debate out there. Let me complete the point that we wanted to talk about here, right? So here the main idea is that pratyaksha gets more, weightage or strength compared to anumana. So we basically say that, this is greater than anumana, because anumana by very definition, the logic by very definition is anumana. It follows another pramana. So Acharya gives a very nice example in his Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya. He says that, look, your pratyaksha says that Prithvi is one of the 5 elements, right? But I create an anumana which says that Prithvi is not one of the 5, is an element at all, because it is not like the other accepted 4 elements. And so logically, I mean, it is a substance, but not like other this thing. So logically, I can create random logic, or I can say that, for example, hares have horns because they are also animals like cows. Which one will take more precedence? Which one is superior? So pratyaksha is superior in our philosophy. So same thing with pratyaksha and agama, right? Lord Rama, Sri Rama, who is Vishnu's avatar, he says it right, so he must be unhappy. In fact, there is a mix of pramanas here. One is what you see in pratyaksha is just the Rama's, tears coming out there.
Correct.
From there you infer that he must be unhappy.
Correct.
So there is a mix of both. Agama says Rama is flawless, he has no pain. So here Agama takes precedence over Rama. Now let's take the other way around. Why is that? Because it is not me. The Rama is not an object that is available to Sakshi, or it is not available to this is an inference that is based on everybody else. But that inference can be overridden by Agama, which is telling you Rama's real nature. If, for example, if Agama says that, some XYZ is like that, we have to accept Agama's case there, even if that XYZ's external behavior does not match to that. Okay, but if the Agama says Rama is black in color, or Rama is brown in color, and Pratyaksha says he's yellow or something like that. I'm just taking some random cases there. So you need to say that this cannot be the true case. You have to resolve this conflict. You see how, at what instance we basically give more weight to Pratyaksha. It is Pratyaksha gets more weightage in all cases wherever the objects are in its scope.
Correct.
But so, for example, if Rama's color was also contested to be different by Agama, Pratyaksha will rule over. But unhappiness is something that Pratyaksha cannot tell. It is an inference.
Right.
And there Agama proves that no, Rama is flawless. He did not have any pain.
Excellent.
Same thing, you go to the next one, right? There is conflict between Sakshi, Pratyaksha and Anumana. Time exists. But people say time does not exist because we can define the governing laws without considering. This is a recent physical development in physics, right? Some people at least claim that way. I can define the whole governing laws, the whatever for unified theory, I can put it without needing time. They can tell all those things. At the end of it, my Sakshi will not be able to accept it because it has accepted time there. I mean, it's Sushupti, everything given, you'll say, okay, at this point of time, they said that time was not needed. I mean, that's what we'll come to a conclusion on. Similarly, when Sakshi says, I am not all-knowing, Agama says, no, you are knowledge itself, you are all-knowing. You have to ditch Agama. Nacha anubhava virode agamasya pramanyam. And this is not this anubhava, whichever we are talking about, is not unlike the anubhava of a rope.
Correct.
It is not, anubhava of a snake.
Yes.
You have done all pariksha, you have done everything, or you didn't even need the feel for, you didn't feel the need for a pariksha at all. It is self-evident. So if somebody says that you are knowledge, or let's say that even that Agama can be anything out there, you will not be able to accept. Same thing applies if Sakshi says, I was happy for a few moments. Agama says it is a state of mind but not of consciousness. This is a problem especially for, how people interpret the Gita. Gita says that, look, Sukham, Dukkham, all the things are the aspects or facets of Prakriti, of mind. It is not of the consciousness.
Correct.
But you have to say, sorry, I don't believe that. Why? Because my Sakshi says I was happy. You cannot override this thing. If you override this particular judgment that my happiness was not mine per se, then whatever you say, there is no way of that thing to be valid. I have no way to judge that whether that is correct or not correct. On what basis will you accept the validity of Agama? You may say Apaurushayatva, Nirdoshatva, all those things, but who is there to accept it? Sakshi has to be there. And if that Sakshi has accepted this to be this happiness, even if it was a fleeting for few moments, right? It has to be true at all times. It cannot be overwritten. So this is what proves our external world, the externality of this and things like that. And by default, look at it, right? Most of the times we do have our perception is intact. There is a laptop, there is this one. There may be few cases of, statistically insignificant, actually speaking, cases of questionable, validity. But eventually after Pratyaksha, after Pariksha, after testing it, we get over those. In case of the Anumana done by the mind, right, it will take little more time. That's what Acharya accepts that. And, for example, how do you know that light takes 8.5 minutes for us to reach from sun? There is no way to know that. It is an Anumana.
You measure it, right?
How do you measure it?
Science measure it.
That is again based on some corroborating two events and then putting a law. It is a form of Anumana at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah, understand. Essentially, observed entity, and from that you conclude something. Therefore, it is Anuman. I agree.
Anumana. Now, has Sakshi accepted this thing? We do not know that part yet.
No.
But it has accepted that there is a sun out there.
Yes.
And there is light coming from there. That is, what do you call, that is irrevocable.
Correct.
On the other hand, if somebody tells tomorrow that, okay, look, it is not 8.5 minutes, it is 10 minutes.
Correct.
You'll say, okay, I will adjust my judgment there.
Correct.
I will, that Bayesian thing, right? I will update my acceptance of that. That is not an issue. If somebody says, look, Earth is not really a sphere, but slightly, it's like more like an ellipsoid kind of thing, then I'll say, okay. So there are places where you can keep updating your knowledge, wherever Sakshi has not given any judgment. But Sakshi has definitely given a judgment on the reality part of it. Without if somebody says that sun doesn't exist, moon doesn't exist, none of that thing exists, then you'll say sorry.
That I
So
totally
that is,
agree.
yeah. So this is the Sakshi theory. There is, from an epistemology point of view, there is one more thing which is very important, right? The question here is, how do we know that whatever three sources that we talked about, are they complete or not complete? Comprehensiveness is an issue. What if there is a fourth type of pramana, or according to Advaita some seventh type of pramana, or according to Nyaya there is a fifth type of pramana, right? How do you know that there are other pramanas or not pramanas? Only Sakshi will tell you that at the end of it. Basically, your scope has been all scope, right? You have perceptible objects, you have inferable objects, and then you have something beyond your perception. So everything is covered by the scripture. Okay. So if something is there beyond this, that also scripture only has to tell. Otherwise, it is apramanika. So your Russell's teacup, right? How do you know there exists a teacup out there, right? So it has to be covered by one of these three things. He basically ridicules the idea that if some scripture mentions it, people will accept it.
Right.
But if it is an object of scripture, then we have to accept it. And why do you say? Because scripture is valid. Why is scripture valid? Because it is apaurushaya. So so we'll come to the apaurushaya part little later. And there are other questions that come in the due course of this thing. When you're studying Nyaya Sudha or any of this thing, people say Agama is not a separate Pramana, it is form of another Anumana. This is rejected big time in Nyaya Sudha. He proves as to why it is another form of another Pramana, and you cannot subsume that under Agama. There is also question of Arthapatti. We consider that as a separate form of another form of Anumana itself, because the structure is similar. And then we think of other things like what about probability, right? So there is one book, I think, The World is Made of Probability kind of thing, right? Everything, given also your uncertainty principle, right? Everything is only probability is what the thing says. But we also consume that, for example, the probability that my bus will come 10 minutes later today, that is also subsumed under Anumana, provided it has real, more meaningful basis. But such Anumanas are all driven by the Manas only. Then, but there is a fundamental difference in how Dvaita and the science gets, they are two different things here. So some people, at least, I don't think science itself does that. One of my friends, at least, he used to say that everything is probabilistic at the fundamental unit of knowledge. So my question was, that is not the case. There is validity, there is certitude, there is incertitude or certitude. So there is certitude associated with that. If that is not accepted, there is no way in which you can even increase or decrease the probability. On what basis? For example, this laptop exists, the probability is 99%. On what basis did we come to this and not say it is like 0.01%? And you should say, okay, it is visible to me, I touch it, I feel it, and then, so how do you then increase the probability based on that? So at the fundamental level, you have to accept that knowledge is certain. There is a certitude with knowledge. Most of it, at least, right? Only in case of questions, when there are similarities and things like that, there can be doubt. Or when there is not enough knowledge, there can be probability.
Yep.
So that is one thing. Then there is question of, abhava. How is abhava known?
Right.
So this again is treated differently in other schools of thought. In Dvaita, abhava is basically, there are three types of abhava itself, and pratyaksha or this one. So the definition that is given is yogyatve sati anupalabdhir abhava. Very important thing. So here the question is there is absence of evidence same as evidence of absence? So many people try to, classify this under a simple yes or no kind of thing. Our Siddhanta or Jaitirtha, he very classifies this, answers this thing. For example, there is what do you call? There is a dish in front of you. That dish, you do not know its taste, so you do not have evidence from, because you are not eaten it yet. It is from the eyes. There is absence of evidence of its taste. Is that become? Does that become evidence of absence of taste? No. Yogyatve sati. That's why he puts that thing called yogyatve sati. It should be perceptible by that particular instrument, and even then, if it is not available to that particular thing, then you treat that as absent.
Correct.
So I'd say that ghata does not exist here because that pot is perceptible to my eyes, and when I do not say that, I treat that as evidence of the pot absence.
Absence.
On the other hand, a dish is there. I cannot treat my absence of since I have not tasted it, I cannot say that is evidence of absence of taste, because that it is not even a subject of my eye, it is a subject of my tongue. Similarly, heaven, hell, God, dharma, adharma, moksha, all of these things, right? You cannot say they do not exist unless you use an instrument to which they are an object of, to which they are objects of. So only then, same thing applies to even Taradamya for that matter. So only for an appropriate instrument, if there is absence, it can be treated as evidence of absence.
Correct.
So that is the fundamental thing here. Now, based on which we can go to the next, this one, which is the ontology. So the idea is that this is when we come to, how do we, swatantram aswatantram chad vividham tattvam ishite. It starts from here. And the main idea is that now we have an epistemology basis. So we have looked at different types of sources of knowledge, the final arbiter or the validator, which is Sakshi, and everything has to be with that, has to fit in this particular epistemic framework. The main point is that, some people say that, all these schools of thoughts are real. It is more of a politically correct statement to make. They give the example of this 6 blind men and the elephant, right? Who are describing different parts of the reality. But that problem does not come to us, because anything atindriya is captured by the scripture. And so we look at all scripture and then come to a position. So the problem of 6 blind men is good to, just say that, be open to new thoughts kind of thing. But from an epistemic principle, it is false. It is wrong. It doesn't make sense. So this is where I would like to end today's this thing. Next, we will look at ontology, which is where, we will come about Swatantra, Vishnu, and, and then later we will look at the Agama. We will see how, different Agamic texts like Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, how they get interpreted. I think once we get to that point, we will have more, a different type of debate over there. So the question, there one more point which I wanted to mention here is that, see here, there is nothing like Vyavaharika or Paramarthika Sat here at least. So Acharya says that he says all Vyavahara is by default Satya only. That the distinction that Advaita or any other school of thought may bring in, right? There are the different order of reality that needs pramana. It's not that we do not accept it or anything like that. We will accept it if there is a pramana. And there is no pramana. And not even the Shruti says there is a Vyavaharika and there is a this thing. Logic cannot establish that. Therefore, we say it is apramana. This distinction between, so whatever context we talk about, right? This particular statement is made in a Vyavaharika context or from the viewpoint of Brahman. All those things we can talk as long as there is pramana for that. That context also needs to be available through the pramana. With that, I would like to end today's discussion.
Thank you very much. So I'm sorry we had a couple of problems. One is network, I think, funny today. And second is I am fever, so I'm not how to engage with you correctly today. I'm sorry for that. Today, I think try to extend, shall we say, using as not merely a statement, but you go beyond as, shall we say, means of validating reality itself, reality of the universe itself. That is a very interesting concept which you And you articulate logically why it is so. That is something which is wonderful. And I hope that the English only kind of audience will find it because people do get lost when you start quoting Nyaya Sudha or something. People do get lost. Let's face it. For example, if Sri Jayatita is spending a lot of time to establish whether the three pramanas or six pramanas, whether some other type of pramana is subsumed by Arthapati is a part of that. These are all only useful to scholars. It is not useful to. Yeah.
No, there is a small issue there. I mean, see, the thing is this, right? It is not just for scholars. For example, tomorrow if I tell you that, on what basis will you determine that there is something called as an independent person, truly independent person? So you need to say that, okay, I will look for that person through pratyaksha or through anumana or through agama. You have to name the source. Okay, is it, for example, a truly independent person will appear in a white shirt? Can you say that make statements? Can you make the statement? You cannot make the statement. How do you know? How do you know that he can appear in white shirt or he cannot appear in that white shirt? And how do you know independence in general? Right? So everything, for example, you have to do achamana 3 times. Why not twice? Why not 4 times or 10 times?
Correct.
Right? A scripture, for example, one of the smritis, it says that a brahmana should use a 12-inch twig to brush his teeth. A kshatriya should use 8 inches. I mean, there are some such dimensions that are mentioned. Why? So dharma, everything is established on the basis of these epistemic sources. So it's not just for the this one, and even when you say consumed or subsumed or not subsumed part of it, right? It is but natural to question every time, even after studying, people will get this doubt. Maybe there is some other pramana, maybe there is something else that we may have missed. So you need to answer these questions before we get there.
Yeah.
So I may have hurried here,
I think again,
eventually as a jignasu, people need to do that.
Oh yeah, I understand. So, so that is one thing. And second thing is, I leave this thought with you. In as much as your argument and by validated by quoting Srimad Acharya also saying that pratyaksha is valid as long as it has the support of right Shastra, right? That's what you said. But the problem here is, you said that in Dvaitis first go to understand epistemology, go to Shastra, and then try to go for individual experience, while others then may not be doing it, was their argument. But the problem in both these positions is that what does Shastra say is very much open